Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 40. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we have a variation of mausape that I am calling Gallarchmausapefeyark. I'm actually pretty surprised I said that correctly on the first try. But all of the Pokemon on this team in some way are designed to support mausape, or at least stand on their own for long enough that they can do something meaningful to help support mausape. So let's just get right into it. Of course, in mausape you have the damage component, which is Annihilape, and our Annihilape is a pretty simple set. We're just going to be clicking the bulk up to increase our attack and defense, as well as we have the Drain Punch in order to recover our health, and we have the Rage Fist, which starts at 50 base power, but every time we take a hit, we increase the Rage Fist by 50 base power, which combined with Mouse Hold, when can side target with Beat Up, will make it so that our Rage Fist becomes like 250 base power instantly and just one-shots everything on the field. As well as we're using Terrifier, just because Terrifier is nice for not getting burned, but it also gives you good resistances into things like Hisuian Typhlosion, Eruption. And we're Defiant, so that when we get intimidated, or have any stat drop for that matter, we're going to be getting a free attack boost, or double attack boost if it's not an attack drop, and Leftovers is just here to keep us around for a really long time. Next up, we got the Mouse Hold part of mausape, and our Mouse Hold is another pretty standard set where we're just running as much speed as we can possibly afford with our supporting moves in the Follow Me to redirect damage away from the Annihilape, and we have the Beat Up in order to activate the Annihilape's Rage Fist, but we can also activate the Gallade, as we'll talk about with Gallade. And we can also activate Archaludon, because Archaludon is Stamina, which we've had before. But we're going to be running the Taunt on Mouse Hold in order to inhibit the opponent from going for status moves. And with Safety Goggles, we won't be getting redirected by Amoonguss Rage Powder, but we can also redirect Amoonguss Spore, or any Spore for that matter, into Mouse Hold, and Mouse Hold will not be getting put asleep by it, which is pretty nice. And we're Terra Ghost so that we're not getting faked out, and we are Friend Guard in order to reduce the damage that the Pokemon that is next to Mouse Hold is taking as much as possible. Next up, we got Hisuian Zoroark, and Hisuian Zoroark can throw a wrench into a lot of people's normal mausape counters, because if you lead something like a Pokemon with Fake Out and want a Mouse Hold, if you don't want to have to use your Ghost Terra on Mouse Hold, you can just lead Hisuian Zoroark and then lead something like the Hyper Voice, which will do a lot of stab damage into the opponent, and by the time that they realize that you don't actually have Annihilape or Mouse Hold on the field, because you could just protect with either one and then attack with Zoroark, you have a pretty good shot of just doing enough damage with Zoroark for 2 turns that you can take out whatever their Mouse Hold counter is. And also, usually when you play against a Zoroark, it's beneficial for you to protect in front of the Zoroark, so that way you can scout out what moves the Pokemon might be using. But if you protect in front of Mausape for too long, then Annihilape's just going to get a bulk up, and Mouse Hold is going to get the side beat up for free. But also on Zoroark, we have the Shadow Ball for other good stab damage against other ghost types, and we have the Burning Jealousy for a bit of a surprise tool, just in case there's something that wants to set up in front of us. And then we have the U-turn on Hisuian Zoroark, just in case we want to pivot out, but it's also nice for dealing some damage into like Indeedee, for example, who doesn't have much physical defense. We can get a nice little bit of chip on Indeedee when all our other moves don't really touch Indeedee. And with the choice specs, we'll be doing a lot of special damage with Hisuian Zoroark, and hopefully getting Hisuian Zoroark in a spot where the opponent messes up and forgets that we have Hisuian Zoroark. As well as we're Terra Normal, just because the Terra Normal Hyper Voice really is going to be your main damage output, so might as well boost it with Terra Normal. And just in case you need a refresher on what Illusion does, it's kind of what we've been alluding to this whole time, but whenever you lead Hisuian Zoroark and you have 2 Pokemon in the back, Hisuian Zoroark will copy the illusion of being with the Pokemon that you last picked, which is really nice for Mausape, because you can just have your Annihilape in the back and then lead Zoroark and just deal damage as Zoroark while your opponent thinks that you're trying to set up Annihilape. Next up, we got Comfey, and Comfey is here mostly to support Annihilape whenever its HP gets gets too low and Maushold gets taken out, we can then bring in Comfey for the floral healing, which will be a +3 priority because of triage, increasing all the healing moves that Comfey has, and floral healing is a healing move that allows you to heal your target for 50% HP. And then we also have Drain Kiss, which is also a priority because it heals Comfey, but it can be some nice little fairy damage in order to get sashes, since nothing is immune to fairy type damage. But we also have the Encore just in case the opponent does decide to double protect first one to see if something is Hisuian Zoroark. We can then Encore the opponent into the protect. Lastly, we're Focus Sash just so we can always take a hit with Comfey and maybe get off like 2 floral healings, which can save us the game. And we're Terra Water just because water resists steel, and we were previously weak to steel is mostly the reason I'm running Terra Water. Up next, we got Big Man's Archaludon here, and this Archaludon set is pretty standard Assault Vest things. However, we are a little bit more support oriented since we're not going for the Electro Shot or anything crazy like that. We have the Snarl in order to decrease the special attack of our opponents, kind of like the first Archaludon that we brought, but this Archaludon has Dragon Pulse to maybe help it try and deal with the other dragons that are popping up, like Dragonite and Hydreigon, as well as we have the Flash Cannon just for the other good stab damage output. And with the Body Press and Mousehold's ability to side beat up into Archaludon, we can just make Archaludon a super physical tank where it body presses everything in the end game, and it's really reliable as we just saw with Baltimore Regionals. And all of our moves are attacking moves, so we can run the Assault Vest in order to increase our special defense, and we're Terra Grass just so we're not getting put to sleep by Among Us. And lastly, we have Gallade, who I think is a bit of an interesting spot on this team because of its ability Justified. Usually these days when you're seeing the Gallades, they're all sharpness, but especially if you're using this enclosed team sheet and you're running Maushold Gallade, where you can be Justified, you can use Side Beat Up in order to proc Justified, and what happens whenever you are hit by a Dark type move is that it raises your attack by 1 stage, so you can immediately get a free +3 on Gallade, and we have Gallade EV'd to be exactly 1 speed point slower than Maushold, which also means that we're speed tying Hisuian Zoroark, but hopefully that never comes up. But with our damage output moves, we still have Sacred Sword and Psycho Cut just because they're our best forms of stab damage. However, now we can run things like Fire Punch and Ice Punch, which if we lead Maushold Gallade into something that's like into a flying type that's like expected to be Annihilate, and we just click Ice Punch into the flying type, we're gonna be in a good spot. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Okay, so here's a battle I had against someone who looks like they're using a semi-recreation of Wolf Glick's team from the Baltimore Regionals, as they do have elements like the Palmot, the Hisuian Typhlosion, the Wheezing, which neutralizing gas, and also the Toadscruel. But they have some swap-ups like Whimsicott for Tailwind instead of Corviknight, and I don't think Alolan Ninetales was on the team, but I'm not going to bother looking it up. So some pretty interesting swaps here. The most fearsome thing was their Typhlosion, because their Typhlosion is Choice Scarf, but it also means that it'll do less eruption damage, which is a bit better for us, as they decided to lead Whimsicott and Palmot, and we lead the Gallade and the Archaludon here, and they immediately decided to tell him with Whimsicott as they close combat into Archaludon. Archaludon's bulky, so it's gonna live that, and we're gonna get the Psycho Cut into Palmot, but Palmot is Sash, so it gets to live as we Flash Can Whimsicott in order to just flat out deal with it. And even if the Whimsicott lived that, which I didn't think it would, it had red card, so we would have swapped our Archaludon into a Pokemon in the back. But now Typhlosion looks like it's gonna clean up here in the end game, as Palmot is able to take out Gallade, who lived the eruption even though it's Terra Fire. But we can Terra Fire with our own Annihilate here and protect Maushold, so that we're getting the Friend Guard boost with Annihilate, and the eruption, even at full health from Terra Fire Typhlosion over here, isn't doing very much damage, and we can just pretty much Drain Punch back all of our health, and the leftovers is going to make Annihilate back at full health, as the eruption comes out again, and close combat is going to finish off the Maushold, but now Palmot is just at 1 health, and we're going to get that bulk up just for a little bit of safety against the Palmot, since it can still go for close combat into us, but eruption is just not going to do that much, and close combat's going to do a little bit more, and we can Drain Punch into Palmot pretty safely here in order to get some, in order to take it out. I was going to say get some good healing, but that is literally 1 health, as they reveal Galarian Wheezing to be their last Pokemon in the back, and they were choice specs, so we can see what move they're going to go for. Not that we could really change what move they were going for. But we get the Rage Fist stacks into Wheezing, and that's going to one-shot it, and at this point, Hisuian Typhlosion has to get the crit Eruption here in order to take us out, but we can pretty safely Drain Punch into Typhlosion to win the game there. So for the second game in the set, I'm thinking about how my opponent is going to change their Mons, as they might have decided to just lead the Alolan Ninetales, who can't be faster than Gallade. We're actually exactly 1 speed point faster with Gallade and Hisuian Zoroark, but they forfeit like immediately, which saves me a lot of time. But I would have liked to see what they would have done if they had decided to lead the Ninetales, as I was thinking about just leading the Maushold and Gallade, since we saw how good Gallade took the Eruption without the Friend Guard from Maushold. But the one downside to us leading Maushold and Gallade in this matchup is if they decide to lead Galarian Weezing and Toedscruel, who Toedscruel could probably just put Gallade to sleep as Weezing tries to give Choice Specs damage, but I'm not sure how much the Psycho Cut would do into the Weezing with, you could probably just Terra out of it with Terra Fire. Okay, so here we have Fire, Water, Grass, and Volcarona, Incineroar, Rillaboom, Palafin, but they also just have Blood Moon, Ursa-Runa, and Ferreira for Trick Room. So I'm not exactly sure how to approach this one. We could just do Annihilate Maushold, because I feel like there's not really too much that stops that from succeeding, other than them leading Farigiraf. We can have Archaludon in the back to deal with Ursaluna, and I guess Comfey for the healing would be nice, as they lead Farigiraf and Rillaboom. Okay, so let's do the Bulk Up and Protect, as they might try. They don't have U-turn, so they can't just U-turn out. So we could just Terra Ghost and taunt the Farigiraf if we really don't want the Trick Room going up, and I don't think we do. So let's just Terra Ghost and taunt the Farigiraf and see what happens. Okay, they Grassy Glided Annihilate, and what does... Okay, they went for the Dazzling Gleam with Farigiraf to do damage into both, but now we could just Bulk Up again. Like, oh, the opponent actually gave up the entire way. Alright, now here we have Dragonite, Paldean Tauros, they Gengar Focus Sash, and they have Electabuzz for Redirection. Okay. This doesn't seem like a bad game for us to start Zoroark here, because we can do like Zoroark and who else? Maybe Comfey? Or Archaludon? Actually, Archaludon might be better. Hey, so I actually ran out of recording space on the flash drive that I used to hold all the storage, probably because yesterday's episode was so long and it had so much data and I wasn't properly deleting it fast enough. But the footage actually cuts pretty much right before where you saw, and we had not only this set but another set after it. Thankfully I was able to save the last set. However, this set is going to be a recreation that I made, which is why the name is different, but all of the moves and items and stuff are the same, so let's just go over it. I lead Maushold and Archaludon with parentheses there, as the opponent leads Dragonite and Kingambit, and this is actually Zoroark, and I'm kind of wishing that I did lead Maushold here, because Maushold side beat up into Archaludon and then body pressing the opponent would put us in a really good position. I don't think I'm confident enough to say that it would win us the game, because Dragonite is Choice Band Stomping Tantrum, but it's not going to do too much to us once we have the defense boost on the stamina. But then I realized that because I have Maushold out, they probably are just going to Extreme Speed and then Sucker Punch into Maushold in order to try and KO it. And since the Zoroark is Choice Specs and not Focus Sash, the Kingambit Sucker Punch is definitely going to KO Zoroark. So first turn, I decided to swap into Annihilate, because that will cancel out both their Extreme Speed and Sucker Punch if they decide to double into that slot. As we just Body Press with Archaludon, it does decent damage into Kingambit, as they just decide to Stomping Tantrum into Archaludon, which I feel like is kind of a weird play, as they also Swords Dance with Kingambit here. And we just get to Drain Punch into King, because I think they went for a Kowtow there, as we Dragon Pulse into Dragonite, and it did about half to it before, so they might have a little bit more defense investment, but Dragonite is going to Stomping Tantrum into Archaludon, and now we can bring in Maushold, quote-unquote, but it's actually Zoroark, and Zoroark is in a prime spot to click Hyper Voice, because it'll KO Dragonite before it gets to move, because we're faster, and it ignores Electabuzz's Follow Me, because it's a spread attack. But they decided to swap in Tauros here, which gave us
us the Defiant boost on Annihilate, which is pretty nice, and we got the Hyper Voice, and the Hyper Voice actually did more like around to 70% to the Tauros, so it was definitely a 2-hit KO. I guess I put too much bulk on this Tauros, and the Electabuzz went for Taunt into Mousehold, perhaps hoping that we would do something different, but the Drain Punch didn't KO their Electabuzz before. The Electabuzz lived, but the result is still the same, as they just decided to cancel the game as they realized that the Mousehold is actually Zoroark, and even if they did bring back in Dragonite in order to click Extreme Speed, they can't Extreme Speed a Ghost type. Okay, and for our last set here, we have a battle against a team that was rocking all kinds of things, with the Sinistcha Volcarona obviously being the most threatening mode that they can do, but also them leading the Palafin was something that I was kind of afraid of at first, and Murkrow had Rain Dance, so it means that Archaludon can start Electro-Shotting, and Kingambit with the Swords Dance setup is always threatening on teams like these. We start the actual... No, this is Zoroark again. That's the hard thing about doing replays for these battles with Zoroark, is even I forget, even though it happened like 10 minutes ago. But we lead Mousehold and Archaludon here, and they decide to Tailwind and then immediately Quiver Dance with Volcarona, which I thought was maybe a little bit of a passive there, because I could have just actually led Mousehold and then side beat up into Archaludon in order to do good body press damage into Volcarona. Even though Volcarona resisted, I mean, it's still like a +3 body press. But they pretty much call the turn exactly great there, because it Quiver Dance, they're not going to take too much damage, and they can just swap in Sinistcha in order to get that Hospitality. And they're still Quiver Dancing, as we're not exerting any real pressure into them right now, as Volcarona comes close to death, but Volcarona is going to go for the Giga Drain into Mousehold in order to get all of that health back. And I went for the Snarl, but I didn't read that Volcarona is Covert Cloak, so it doesn't care about the Snarl, which... it helps to read things. We're going to protect with Annihilate here, as I thought they would use Volcarona in order to attack it, as they reach Power Sinistcha to get rid of damage, and they go for another Quiver Dance on Volcarona, so we're not in a great spot as long as Volcarona keeps setting up. But this turn they decide to swap in Murkrow, perhaps to reset their Tailwind for the next turn, as they Giga Drain, Annihilate, but that is a decent chunk to Annihilate, but not enough to 2-KO us, as we go for the bulk up that I thought we were going to need, which I think we do need it here. They bring in Kingambit, and they decide to Sucker Punch into Annihilate, as if Volcarona attacked there, it probably would have just won the game after all the special attack boosts, but they decided to go for another Quiver Dance, maybe thinking that they wouldn't be able to break Archaludon. But I tried to Rage Fist into Kingambit here, because I really thought that they were going to bait the switch back into Sinistcha with Kingambit, as we could just Drain Punch the Kingambit to like get all of our health back, or we could Body Press with Archaludon to do massive damage into it. I thought their play was going to be swapping in the Ghost type there in order to just heal up Volcarona for free and then go for another Quiver Dance or attack with Volcarona. But they just decided to keep Kingambit in there, so we could have just Drain Punched Kingambit in order to get all of our health back. As Annihilate's going to protect, and we catch the turn, and Kingambit also protects, and the Body Press does enough into Volcarona, and thankfully we didn't burn ourselves on its Flame Body the previous turn, as now it is Kingambit and Sinistcha versus everything, but I can swap in Mousehold here, which makes it that the Sucker Punch never KOs the Annihilate, and we get to Rage Fist into Sinistcha, and now we can follow me in order to make it so that Kingambit can't Sucker Punch into Annihilate, or even attack and Annihilate for that matter. And Drain Punch is going to get a clean KO on Kingambit right there. In game 2, I'm trying to think about what my opponent's adjustment is going to be, and I think about them not leading Murkrow in order to just lead something flat out like Sinistcha in order to get the Rage Powder so that Volcarona can set up immediately. So I decided to lead Gallade and Mousehold here, as they lead Palafin, which was the Pokemon I was probably the most afraid of, was them leading Palafin, because it's Choice Banded, so I'm really not sure how much the Choice Banded flip turn will do into Gallade. But we decided to side beat up into Gallade here in order to activate our Justified, and we do crit ourselves there on the one beat up, which is a little annoying. As we get all 4 hits of the beat up, so Gallade is now at ×3 attack, and that makes it so that Psycho Cut is able to directly KO Volcarona, and Flip Turn Choice Banded does not do as much damage as I think it's going to do. Kingambit Terra Darks here, and we're currently locked into Psycho Cut, so I think their best turn there would have been to like protect Palafin and then attack with Kingambit into Mousehold in order to try and get rid of the redirection, but they don't have Protect on Palafin as we just previously discussed because they're Choice Band. So we get to follow with Mousehold away the Jet Punch, and Psycho Cut is going to take out Palafin, as Kingambit decides to go for the Swords Dance, perhaps valuing a little damage increase there. As the opponent now brings in Sinistcha, and I follow me so that they can't Sucker Punch at all with King Gambit, and we get the Psycho Cut into Sinistcha, which doesn't KO, but it still does good damage into it. As Mouthhold catches the crit here, which I'm not sure would have KO'd it without the crit, but Sinistcha gets a lot of healing off of that Machagacha. And now we bring in Annihilate, who I didn't want to catch the Machagacha burn, so we Terra Fire, and we get the safety bulk up just because now we can use Archaludon in the back to Rage Fist into Sinistcha, and we can Dragon Pulse into Sinistcha in order to get rid of it, and they Kowtow into Archaludon, which actually does 100% into it, which I was not exactly expecting, but it is Terra Dark Black Glasses times 2 King Gambit, so I don't know what I should have been expecting as Annihilate. As King Gambit and Annihilate are now the only 2 Pokemon left in the field, and it's kind of like a 50... I mean, the battle is definitely in my favor at this point, but it's kind of a 50-50 scenario where King Gambit protects, and we're just trying to Drain Punch into King Gambit. But I actually think that the optimal move here might just be to continue to bulk up with Annihilate, because even if King Gambit Sword Stances, in order to win, they would have to get like a Sucker Punch crit with, once we get up like 3 bulk ups, even the ×4 attack boost on King Gambit probably wouldn't KO us. But I decided Drain Punch, and Drain Punch doesn't KO King Gambit, and they Sword Stance, which is kind of awkward, but seeing as they still have to Sucker Punch us, I decided to give 1 safety bulk up in order to increase our defense, and on the next turn that they Sucker Punch, I am very glad I went for that safety bulk up, because we would not have lived without it, and we get the Drain Punch into King Gambit, KOing it and taking the game. So yeah, that was the
Gallarchmausapefeyark
team, and I'm actually thinking about building this team in-game for the Grand Challenge that's coming up. Of course, I'm not sure how involved I'm going to be in actually playing the Grand Challenge games. I might just play like 5 games and see how this team does. But I mean, I think it does pretty well, especially probably more in a closed team sheet format because of the things that we have with Gallade that I think can be really good to countering a lot of what's popular into the meta right now. But that is going to be it for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video and even consider subscribing, because both of those things help me out an absolute ton. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.